I think it's fair to say that the bulk of the people, or at least the group that is being represented by the mainstream media as the ones that are against, immigration and against having these little kids come over here, or the adults or whatever, or people are taking their jobs and all this business, are Republicans.
Right.
And Republicans fairly, I think, worship Ronald Reagan.
Okay.
Some do. Right?
Yeah, I think by and large that's fair. And I'm not saying
an icon. How's that?
Yeah, he's an icon, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad thing. You know, I've had my Reagan moments, where I really appreciated him. But it's ironic because Reagan actually said that this was okay. Like, he understood that he actually called them economic migrants, and that this happened in the 80s, and nobody freaked out. I find it very, very strange that now you have these same groups that were somehow okay with it in the 80s now are just, really, they're brandishing just about everything to say, no, these people can't come here, and if they're here, we need to send them back home.
But Brian, everything changed on 9/11.
Oh, that's it. Right.
Well, I think that reasonably, what I think is that, nobody wants a bunch of freeloaders. I'm not interested in anybody showing up at my house that wants to eat the food, use the electricity, get Wi-Fi access, and do everything that they do without paying their dues, without paying, if somebody wants to come and rent my house for $3,000 a month or something like that.
Sure.
Yeah, they can stay there, and I'll move someplace else.
Sure.
Because that's a good deal for me. But when if they want to pay $3 a month, then I don't. Right? It's all about payment. And when it comes to people, most Americans, I think many Americans will be fine with the idea of people coming here and working to make a better life for themselves and their families. Away from the harm that, frankly, U.S. foreign policy has brought upon their nations in many cases.
Absolutely.
Just like a lot of the economic refugees in the 80s.
Sure. Now, people, according to this article, are clearly recognizing, though, to even get in here legally is just this insane process that you have to go through. And they were waiting for this bill that was supposed to streamline this process to get people into this country that want to be here for, quote unquote, the right reasons, whatever that happens to mean. But they said that's enough. We're not going to wait anymore for the politicians to do something about it. And they ended up going on, doing it on their own. And I think the other interesting point here that's really fascinating is not just the Republicans are the ones that are like, look, kick these people out of the country. I think you hear it from a lot of Christians. And I do want to...
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of Republicans are Christians.
Yeah,
so.
right. And I just want to say kudos. As an atheist myself, as someone who has no love lost for the Christian religion, kudos to these people for standing up and really practicing the religion for once, saying, no, we will love you and accept you and not turn you away.
Yeah, it's pretty clear. The Bible's very clear about accepting strangers in your land and that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, just picture Jesus saying, well, you're a Mexican. Sorry, son, you're not coming into heaven.
Right, Jesus who hung out with prostitutes and, those that were they were outside the law. What you'll hear is illegal coming out of the mouth of somebody who, is supposed to be a Christian. Consider for a second that Jesus came to stand against those that were, that decided who would be the chosen ones because of the law. Jesus put down, the Jesus of the Bible put down the Pharisees for their their intolerance, their being married to the law and all this stuff. And this is a civil infraction. It's not even a criminal infraction. What is the punishment for being here illegally? It's a civil infraction.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't get it. In fact, I mean, honestly, for Christians to be against immigration or to even be for borders really blows my mind, especially you take something like Galatians chapter 3, I think it's verse 26, where Paul is saying, look, if you believe in Christ, you are the seed of Abraham. Christians shouldn't even see borders. They shouldn't even see genetics. All they should see is belief. And at least these Christians here in this coalition and the Christians in the 80s that were part of this whole sanctuary movement, they are living up to those words that they're supposed to venerate so much. And they are, like you said, they are practicing the things that Jesus talked about. I think it's pretty clear. Jesus was all about, and I'm not a fan of the guy, but Jesus was all about just leveling all of these crazy notions that existed at the time, particularly religious ones, but also some state ones.
Yeah, would Jesus have been all excited about Roman citizenship? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, right.
Paul didn't even seem that excited about it, although he was a Roman citizen.
Yeah, he used it, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah.
These people in the church are using their citizenship to give sanctuary to other people.
Yeah.
I think it'd be very weird to try to house people in your church. I mean, you're trying to do sort of business there and have some folks camping out in the sanctuary.
Some of them have little houses, like where maybe the, what's it called? The priest lives.
Oh, yeah, that's a parsonage.
Parsonage, yeah.
Yeah, but the priest is living there.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, you could make it happen. You've got the baptismal area there. People can take a bath. I mean, come on. This isn't that hard.
So, okay, what I wonder about Ronald Reagan is, like, in the 80s, people couldn't get welfare. I mean, I know that he kind of cracked down on it famously, but, like, there was plenty of welfare in the 80s, right? What changed between then and now?
Well, as far as welfare goes, illegal immigrants really can't get it. It's pretty rare for at least reasonably
that's my
rare
understanding. But it seems to be this common misconception nowadays that people think illegal immigrants are coming here and just getting all this welfare.
But if somebody comes here illegally and has children, then that child is eligible for all kinds of benefits that somebody else couldn't. Mm-hmm. Now, for one, if you're illegal in this country and you get hurt, they have to take you at an emergency room. They can't just turn you away.
Right.
So that becomes the de facto doctor's office, unless there's facilities in that town to take care of them. Everything for mothers and infants, WIC, a variety of things that takes care of young ones. All that's available. And I'm of the opinion that I don't think that people here should have to pay for folks that come here to get a bunch of free stuff. But then again, I don't think that you should necessarily have to pay for somebody else who doesn't want to work either.
Whether they were born in America or whether they're American or Mexican or whatever. Right?
I don't think it really matters. And I can tell you that churches will step up to take care of these folks, as evidenced by this article.
And good for them. I applaud them.
Going on with this article that you've got there, Brian, where churches, I guess, are giving sanctuary in their sanctuaries.
Yeah, in 12 cities in the U.S. That they have decided to.
Now, yeah, I mean, we've been
illegal immigrants.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is good just for those who are just tuning in case you missed it. Churches are, giving sanctuary to immigrants. But I wonder about other groups, other like marginalized groups, like. Why aren't churches giving sanctuary to like homeless gay teenagers whose parents have kicked them out? Why aren't churches giving sanctuary to war tax protesters who are hiding from the government? And of course it's a great start, and I hate to criticize them for what they're not doing. But
the Quaker Church has definitely given support to people who are doing war tax resistance, and so I think that to some extent you've seen that happen. The homeless gay teenager thing, I think you could probably get sanctuary if you were willing to give up prostitution and, drug use and drinking and a variety of things that people who hit the streets might be participating in.
I doubt a lot of them want to keep a lot of times if they're doing survival prostitution, they're not doing it for fun.
Probably not. They're probably doing it for the money, but they're getting the money in order to do the drugs in a lot of cases.
Well, if their parents, anyway, we've kind of gotten off topic, but
all I'm saying is that I think that most churches, I would imagine that most churches would.
What I was trying to say was like I'm curious why they've chose to focus on immigrants at the moment.
Well, it's in the news. They're getting
true.
They're getting some.
It seems like churches have this incredible power, right? Like to be left alone by the government. I mean, if any other group, if your club, if you're like local, I don't know, just Free Keene tried to shelter illegal immigrants. There is no chance that Free Keene would be left alone by the government.
Indeed, it would not.
So why do churches get a pass?
Because churches are churches. They've been around longer than the government. So,
I think that's true.
Well, Yeah, that's a good point. It's just inconsistent.
The space they occupy in people's heads, right?
Yeah, that's all what it is.
Well, I mean, yeah, consider that most religious people consider God's law generally higher than the state, and so
Let's hope so, for God's sake.
Yeah, the last thing you want,
unless it comes to immigrants.
Yeah, yeah, right.
Right.
The last
There's some
thing the state
exceptions.
would want is to have a revolt on their hands by religious people because they saying no, God invalidates your law. Which
Right,
honestly,
they'd rather turn the religions against each other.
Sure.
Like they have in the immigration issue, where you've got religious people on both sides sort of battling it out.
Oh, absolutely.
That's the best thing for them is just to keep everybody fighting against everyone
Yeah,
else.
yeah. Keep everybody separate in any way, or divided, I should say, not separate, divided in any way you can. That's really a good way to keep in power.
Let's go to Skype. You can actually Skype us. Our username is lrn.fm. We've got Steve calling in. Steve, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
Basically, why are the churches supporting illegal immigrants? It's because the churches, as an example, the Roman Catholic Church, receives something like $4 billion each and every year from the federal government.
Why?
For various programs, such as food banks, that type of thing. So they're receiving a lot of money. Therefore, to continue to receive the money, I believe that they're supporting Obama's illegal push to get immigrants into the country. That's why they're doing it.
But what about the idea that the Bible talks about supporting strangers in your land, and the idea that Jesus would certainly welcome illegals?
I'm sure that's the case, but we have to look at the reality of being bankrupt.
Yeah, it's a convenient cover story.
Well,
right?
I think that the nation's bankrupt. The nation's never actually had not been in debt, which is an amusing idea for that the debtor is the slave to the lender. And this is supposed to be the land of the free, but it has never been debt free. So that's kind of funny. But I mean, an immigrant doesn't want your free, in many cases, doesn't want free stuff from the government. They just want an opportunity to work.
I don't believe that because most
You don't
of the
think that any immigrants want to work?
No, I'm not saying any.
Okay.
I'm saying most of them that are coming from South and Central America have backgrounds in socialist governments, that they want the government to take care of them. Most of them are.
But they don't. The governments of those countries are even worse off than the United States.
Understood. That's why they're coming to the United States, because they want the government to take care of them.
So
That's
if
why.
we stopped welfare, then you think that it would just stop people from coming?
It would curtail it. I definitely.
I think it would curtail it.
Yeah,
I think it would lessen it, no doubt.
I think that there's a percentage of the population in every country that are the entrepreneurs, the people that want to make a better life for themselves.
Exactly.
They'll do what it takes. And if we can make a program for those people to come here, we'll have the strongest nation on the planet.
But we do have that right now. If they enforce the current government regulations that are there for bringing in people, like you could bring in a doctor or an engineer, scientists.
Silicon Valley has a terrible time bringing in.
Yeah, it's hard. It's easier
immigrants.
said than done. I mean,
This
as a former scientist,
You're correct. You're absolutely correct. But right now we bring in 1 million legal immigrants each year. Every year, 1 million legal immigrants. We have them on the books, and then we have I think 600,000 people come in to work on the farms and stuff like that. They get the special agricultural visas. Increase that if we need people to help, but push for educators, scientists. You get the medical people. Bring those people in, not the people who can't even read Spanish.
I don't care. I don't care if they can read or not. Lots of smart people. Lots of people who've made great businesses can't read.
I don't know about that. I would think that maybe 5% of those people, but I think 95% are coming just for the welfare and the food stamps.
So, Stephen, why does Obama, going back to something you said before, why does Obama want people to come into the U.S. illegally?
Because he wants to make sure that they all vote Democrat and they have a one-party system, and he wants to undermine the values of America by overloading the system. We are not going to be able to handle all of the welfare payments, the food stamps, the EBT cards here in Massachusetts. It's nuts.
It is nuts. I agree with you there.
I don't disagree with your assessment on that, but I think the Republicans really miss an opportunity when they shoot down everybody who wants to create a path to citizenship. But
they're not doing that. They're not stopping other people from coming in. 1 million people are coming in right now, legally.
It needs to be higher. That's less than a third of a percent. Thanks for the call, Steve.
Then make it 2 million.
Let's go to Tom calling in from New Hampshire. Tom, you're on Free Talk Live.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's about ISIS. And, Senate candidate Scott Brown, formerly the U.S. senator from Massachusetts, who's running here in New Hampshire, for people who are confused about this. Scott Brown has this plan. He wants to revoke the United States citizenship of any U.S. citizens who fight alongside ISIS. And that's his big campaign theme. And the problem is that this U.S. Supreme Court has already said you cannot take away people's citizenship as punishment for anything or any other way than they explicitly wanted to lose their citizenship. Much to the dismay. Now the problem has come up for a lot of Canadians who've been Canadians for many years. They were born in the United States. They became citizens of Canada. They took the oath to the Queen. And U.S. statutes used to say if you do that, then you lose your U.S. citizenship. And now along comes the Supreme Court and says, oh, no, it's only if that's what they wanted when they did that. And now the question is, are these people U.S. citizens, and why haven't they been paying taxes and filing bank account reports to Washington, D.C. after all these years after statute said that they weren't citizens anymore? And there's a lot of gray areas because they've had children in Canada who are U.S. citizens if the mother was still a U.S. citizen. And this issue of people, of course, are stampeding to renounce their United States citizenship that they're still infected with under U.S. laws.
But this is the weird thing about citizenship.
Yeah, I think this is actually, I say Scott Brown, go for it. Let it get passed. And the reason why is because then pretty much anybody here that wants to be an expat and avoid taxes, just say you joined ISIS, and then you don't have to pay those taxes.
What if the state of Vatican City were to pass a law saying anybody who's got, a baptismal record in any Catholic church, we've got, your name, the date you were baptized, your parents' name, where they're from, we know who you are, and you have to pay a tithe to the Catholic Church now, no matter where in the world you are. If a country can tax its citizens, decide who its citizens are outside its borders, and tell them they have to pay taxes and report their bank accounts and everything. I've already mentioned on your program that Kenya could claim President Obama because he was born in Hawaii to a Kenyan father, a citizen born overseas to a Kenyan father. They could impose such restrictions on him. It's absurd, but yes, the idea has been mockingly brought up by some of the Canadians that post on the Isaac Brock Society website there. It's not really a society. It's just a website that they're furious that they're being told they have to pay tax to the United States under the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. The
Right.
Canadian banks are trying to find out who is infected with United States personhood.
Right, and this is the United States is way too big for its britches. Every other country in the world says if you make money while inside of our little shape on the map, you've got to pay us. You got to pay us some money, and that's sort of the accepted way of doing things. However, the United States says, and if you look at its foreign policy, it really doesn't believe that it's that Washington D.C. doesn't believe that it is relegated to the shape on the map that is the United States. It believes it owns the globe.
Sure.
And it acts that way because they say anywhere you are on the planet, if you make more than $90,000 a year, that's the threshold if you're outside the United States, $90,000, then you owe us a percentage of your income, which is fascinating that they think that they can do that. They also make it very difficult for people who are living outside the United States to get bank accounts. In many countries, the banks simply won't do business because the compliance costs and dealing with all the paperwork with the federal government's too hard.
Almost every country won't do business because
that's why U.S. citizens are giving up their citizenship.
Yeah, it really.
Check this out. Check this out. You get people applying for a job, like let's say working in the bookkeeping office at a factory. Oh no, you would have to sign the paychecks. and having signature authority over a Canadian bank account, you would be required under U.S. law to report the balance of the bank account and how much money is in there and everything else. When you're a Canadian citizen, maybe you were born in the USA, a border baby, they brought you across, they brought mom across the border to have the baby and then went right back into New Brunswick. There's a lot of those. And these people are being turned away from job opportunities, and the issue is coming up. What about the accounts that lawyers have to keep for their clients if the lawyer is a Canadian citizen but is also under U.S. law considered to be a United States citizen?
Yeah, this is what the government does. It makes it very, very difficult for people.
Headaches. It's
Thanks
all
so much
one
for the call,
planet.
Tom.
Yeah. It's really, citizenship, it really shows the joke that citizenship is, because citizenship is meaningless if what you're a citizen of has no teeth. But if what you're a citizen of has teeth and is willing to use it against you, that becomes the joke. That becomes, irrelevant.
The only way you're going to see competition in the area of governance, because that's what we want. We've got 200 or so countries on the planet. The way they're going to get better is through competition, innovation, serving customers.
I don't know if I want competition.
Yeah.
I want the ability to opt in and out.
Well, that's the only way you can do it, though. If you can say, look, I want to fluidly move across geographic borders. I want to be able to live at the place that's going to offer me the best citizenship deal. And that's what I'm looking for. And, these countries are saying, no, you're locked in. You've got a contract. It's the social contract. When you were born, we stamped our country's logo on your butt.
Yeah, you're right. But that's the thing, is that if you had competition of governance, they would say the same thing. I'm worried that they would just be the same way. They'd just be a smaller.
We do have competition, and because they make it difficult to move from one country to another, that's why you have the lack of innovation. It's the U.S.
Well,
State
competition
Department.
matters more if you are able to move fluidly around the globe, because right, that's what we're both saying, basically.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think the corruption can happen in so many ways, and I think that if there is, if you can't choose, if you can't walk away from a citizenship without debt, I'm concerned.
Right. We forgot to mention the exit tax. We forgot there's filing fees to get rid of your citizenship. Look, the fact is, slavery throughout humankind has had a cost to buy yourself out of slavery.
Yeah, you have to be able to walk away from these things at no cost. And I'm concerned because you know what? We talked about Bitcoin. In fact, at that Coins in the Kingdom, there's going to be a Bitcoin marriage. There's going to be it's called BitNation.
Yep.
Okay. There's going to be a marriage there. And I am concerned because people seem to be very excited about this BitNation.
Let's put our government on the blockchain.
Yeah, because here's governance that you can choose. But here's my question is, can you walk away from that at no cost? Because if you can't, then they're just more tyrants.
Well, Brian, they provide divorce services too.
Well, that's the thing. In fact, they talked about that. They said with this BitNation that, you could join savings accounts. Look, you're missing the whole concern here. The idea is that
I think
you're getting stuff held over in your head that you have to follow that you never agreed to.
Right. Like, it wouldn't be very free if someone said to you, okay, right, there's all these different religions in the world and they're competing for your allegiance, but you have to pick one. You can't be an atheist. I want the ability to be an atheist in addition to whatever religion I might choose. That's real freedom. That's having the most options. And same thing with states.
And you have to be able to change your mind, too. Like, you could tomorrow, as unlikely as this sounds, you could decide tomorrow that you're going to be a Hasidic Jew.
I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen.
I'm pretty sure it isn't, too. Like, I would put really good money that that's not going to happen. But you could decide that. And that's what a person needs to be able to choose for themselves.
Yeah, but they need to be able to choose to completely opt out.
Yeah, if you can't walk away from it, it's a tyranny. And I think people would say, well, but there's got to be some cost. Well, again, you're a tyranny.
855-450-3733. What do you think about this archaic notion of citizenship? Did it just come from kings owning serfs? 855-450-3733. Let's go to Jimmy calling in from Florida. Jimmy, you're on Free Talk Live.
How am I sounding?
You sound just fine.
Good. And I'm not on Skype.
I know.
I'm trying to figure out how to say what I want to say in a comprehensive manner. But basically what it boils down to is a bunch of men read a book that's 100 years old and decided that they're going to apply that book to other people by way of pointing guns at them. That's all this citizenship BS is.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty succinct and right on.
It's interesting because the conversation about citizenship really wasn't a big one early on in the United States. It didn't become really a big deal till the late 1800s with the Yellow Man laws and the Chinese are taking our jobs. And
there's
kind of
always
thing.
a boogeyman. It changes every 20 years or so. Right?
Well, if there isn't a boogeyman, you can't have a state.
Yeah, but if you boil it down to the basic principles, a bunch of men wrote the Yellow Man laws or whatever it was. The
Yeah, I
Yellow
believe
Pages
that's what
laws?
they're called. Yep.
Okay, so they wrote words on paper and said, okay, now we're going to take it with our guns and apply it to everybody else. All it is a gang of pirates pointing guns at innocent people, and the innocent people, it seems to me, their only choice is to point guns back because.
Well, I disagree with you there, Jimmy. I mean, it's actually like you can't do anything about it, but it is very powerful to realize it and stop giving the system your moral support, right? Because most people are at the stage where they still believe that it's legitimate and great to be a citizen, and they're even proud of it, which in some cases they didn't choose to be a citizen. They were just born somewhere. And to be proud of something that you have no control of, such as where you're born, I mean, what is that, right? There's no pride there. It's basically just kind of nationalism.
Oh, I love it. It's just like sports where, oh, look, I loved Joe Montana when he was in San Francisco, but then when he went to play for the Kansas City Chiefs, oh, I hate that guy. It's like, wait a minute.
It's so arbitrary. But I mean, I think there are things you can do besides start pointing guns back at the government. And the first and most easy, well, maybe it's not easy, but the first step that probably needs to happen is just not giving the idea your moral support, just stopping believing in it, right?
Right. And I get where you're coming from, Jimmy. The non-aggression principle, that's the idea that what libertarians consider the sort of foundation of morality, which is that, you don't aggress against other people. But if somebody uses violence against you, you should be allowed to defend yourself. And that's all you're claiming. But I think that the monopoly on violence that is the state is so powerful and so righteous in people's minds that there's no winning in applying the non-aggression principle to them.
And if enough people stop giving it that credibility in their minds, though, at some point in time, the legitimacy is just going to fall away, and you don't need a violent revolution. It's just kind of people move past that idea naturally that we need citizenship or we need governments.
I don't know. I'd take the scenario of slavery. There's 50 slaves on a plantation and 10 guys with whips and chains and guns. If those 50 guys would have went aggressive, but then again, there's another gang of 1,000 guys that read a 100-year-old book that's going to chase them down. Mm-hmm. It's not that you can just not lend them support because they're going to follow you everywhere you go. There's got to be a point.
But slavery ended not in the U.S., but in a lot of other places in the world. Actually, everywhere else in the world, the institution of slavery ended without bloody revolution. It just
in Europe,
the idea just fell away.
Yeah, it became distasteful.
And it's hard to say that if you're a slave who's in that system right now, you're obviously feeling terrible. You don't want to be in that system. But given the choice between staying alive, because if you confront the state or you point out or you confront the abusers, they're probably going to hurt you pretty badly. So making the choice to just kind of stay alive and do what it takes to protect yourself until the point where this institution just naturally falls away because people evolve beyond it. That's what I would prefer, the strategy I would prefer.
I wish it would fall away, but
Yeah,
the
me too.
formal institution of slavery may have disappeared, yet those people still must pay their taxes and must pay their dues, or GovCo is going to come and get them.
It's
and
true.
They're still slaves. It's just not so ugly and terrible looking. It's
Jimmy,
not Saddam Hussein who would chop your hand off in the street.
Yeah.
They do it behind closed doors.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I think Jimmy had some great points to bring up. Obviously I don't agree with, going to violence over this, but it's funny because so many people are like, look, we got to get back to the Constitution. And and a lot of those people will agree. I'm not saying that's what Jimmy was saying, but, and a lot of people will totally agree. You can't put debt onto a future generation. And it's like, if you can't put debt on them, how can you put laws onto a future generation? Like, I mean, that's the thinking, the line of thinking that these people have is that you can't put debt on it because it's not their fault. Well, also, I would venture the laws, these pieces of paper are not their fault or their decision either. It really blows my mind.
You would have an extreme change in government. Extreme change in the government of this country if debt couldn't be carried from one generation to another. I mean, consider for a second that a parent that uses their child's credit score because they've ruined theirs, that person will be incarcerated for theft. But a nation that mortgages its grandchildren's future, normal. Clayton in Arkansas. Clayton, you're on Free Talk Live. What's on your mind?
One of the narratives that's not being told about the whole immigration crisis is how much immigration policy has changed over the course of this country's history. I mean, my grandfather or great-grandfather came over from Mexico, I think for about $2. He crossed the border in, the early part of the 20th century.
Clayton, I want you to get a chance to say a bit more here on this because I think that this is absolutely true. Immigration policy has changed dramatically. A few generations ago, you landed on Ellis Island. They screwed your name up. They held you for 3 days, made sure you didn't have herpes or whatever, and sent you on your way. And that was it.
Yeah. Then the quota system came.
We were hearing from Clayton specifically about how immigration laws have changed. And Clayton, I wanted you to get a chance to finish up what you were saying.
Yeah. I think as I was saying, my grandfather crossed the border at the beginning of the 20th century, and it was, or my great-grandfather crossed the border at the beginning of the 20th century, and he crossed for just, a few dollars and a signature on a piece of paper.
Yeah, I think the Constitution says $10, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's $10.
The thing is, I mean, just the rhetoric is crazy on this. Whenever I hear, sort of quote-unquote conservatives talking about this issue, they'll say, how dare they come over here and make money and work? How dare they come over here and do things that are moving the American economy forward? It's completely the wrong way to approach this issue. We need to be rewarding people for working.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I think a lot of people don't think of. It's easy because we're taught this as we're growing up. It's easy to think of foreigners as alien. That's even the terminology that's used, aliens and illegals. They don't ever say human beings who want to work and human beings who are just like you, except they happen to maybe speak a different language or look a little bit different.
I wish I had better terminology, too, because even the term immigrant, I think, is loaded. Consider for a second that New Mexico.
We're all immigrants, or all of our ancestors are. I mean.
Well, I'm an immigrant. I moved from Florida to New Hampshire. New Mexico's constitution's written in both Spanish and English. So
always has been.
It always has been. It was written originally because it's called New Mexico, right? And
right.
I mean, so the suggestion that you have to, oh my God, I'm America, I shouldn't have to push 1 or 2 or whatever to get English. Well, yeah, you should, because this is entirely an English-speaking country. But the idea that somebody south of the border there is called an immigrant, but somebody north of it isn't. I mean, so if somebody from New Mexico moves to New Hampshire, they're just somebody who moved. If somebody from Chihuahua moves to New Hampshire, they're an immigrant. And I'm not sure I even like this terminology because it gives credence to Washington bureaucrats that really should have no business over this.
Yeah, and really immigration.
I mean, does a person's character really change when they cross the border? I mean, do they change in their fundamental ontological human characteristic when they cross the border? And the answer is no.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly.
The one thing that you could claim about people crossing borders illegally is that the border is the gateway drug to criminality. I don't believe it, but you might make the claim is that, look, I was able to cross the border and have a better life. Maybe I could commit some other crimes and have a better life. And that's a problem of the border, not of the person coming here and trying to work. So,
Exactly
don't create
right.
the gateway mentality. Thanks so much for the call, Clayton. I do appreciate it. And, hey, I'm so glad he got to hear, different ideas because the ideas in America seem to be so homogenous these days.
Well, it's important, considering American ideas, I think it's important to, if you just research the various immigration acts that America has passed, the immigration reform, if you will, throughout the past couple centuries or past 150 years or so, and if you look at the personal correspondence of a lot of the people that passed some of this immigration reform, maybe not counting Calvin Coolidge, I think you're going to find some pretty serious racism, some real backwards thinking, some real antiquated thinking.
Well, you're going to find racism if you go and poking around with politicians anywhere in the first part of the 20th century.
Sure, but that's the thing.
Eugenics was a thing back then.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about like the last big one was 1924. That's the one that Calvin Coolidge signed. I mean, things could have been changed then, and you'd say, well, yeah, that's the 20s. Okay, fine. Let's go 20 years forward to FDR. Okay, and this guy, read his personal correspondence about Jews and the Japanese. I mean, this guy's about the Jews, and you're going to read some of the most racist remarks you could possibly imagine. He was complaining about the Jews in Oregon. He was saying in his personal correspondence,
Oregon was being overrun by
the Jews.
And we can see that history has borne him out.
Yeah, right.
what Jews in Oregon?
Yeah, right. No idea.
Or just look at the correspondence about the Irish in this country in the past.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it reads so ugly, and these laws are either responses to that or they are from that time. They have nothing to do with today. Folks, we're in the 21st century.
I hate to see those Irish people with their flags displaying their pride and their heritage and, eating their Irish food and having their Irish parades. It shows that they just haven't integrated.
Yeah.
Isn't it ludicrous? I mean, you think every white American's Irish, essentially. I mean, and they go out and they drink themselves some green beer on St. Paddy's Day, which of course they don't do in Ireland.
Yeah.
And somehow they're not they're integrated as they could possibly be. Integration's kind of this funny thing too.
Well, let's get serious for a moment here, okay? Because really, the Mexicans, they have diseases. They're just looking, okay, they're freeloaders. They're not going for jobs. Wait a minute. Didn't Hitler say that about the Jews? That's weird.
I don't know, but probably.
They leached off the country's economy. So I guess maybe we should start practicing eugenics if we don't want them here.
I think that we could all learn something from hardworking immigrants is what I think. I think
absolutely
that we'd just be far better off if we worked like we wanted to build a better life for ourselves rather than expecting the government to take care of all your problems. Yep, plenty of immigrants come here. They leech off the system. That's your fault for allowing a system that would allow it. We had a guy call in who had a reasonably good idea, which is essentially take all the money from U.S. foreign intervention around the world, especially the Middle East, apply it to the border. Well, I say, take the inefficiencies of the border situation and let people keep their money so they can employ people who come across the border.
Sure.
We'd be much better off.
Sure. And this has been mentioned on the show before, but I think it bears repeating. You take NAFTA, this was something that was put into action, in the 60s?
Well, it's it got implemented in a large scale NAFTA in the 90s under Clinton.
Okay,
but there might have been pieces of it that
there's quite a bit, and part of that was what workers can come in here legally to do good work. This is even people from Canada.
The wetback laws of '68 were what stopped essentially people who just came here half the year to work for picking fruit and stuff.
Sure, but these laws are decades old, and guess what? None of these laws have any response to the fact, say someone wants to come over here and they want to do computer science, or they want to help out Google or something like that. They can't come here, even if we wanted them to go through all those wonderful reforms that the United States set up, because these laws are so old. You have to reform this, or just get rid of it entirely.
Robert in Vermont. Robert, you're on Free Talk Live.
Hey, Brian, correct me, I may have heard you wrong, but the last segment there, you said that people from other countries can't come over here and work in the United States and go back home afterwards?
No, what I was saying is that the immigration laws that exist are actually have no response to a lot of modern jobs like the tech industry. You really can't come unless you lie and massage your way in via NAFTA. You cannot come into this country, and if you want to work a computer job.
Yeah, NAFTA was written before those jobs really existed.
Right.
So you have to change your job description, and you have to kind of know how to navigate the system too. Like, not every company knows how to do that, but some do, and they've got this process down, it's kind of convoluted. It's just hard.
You have to cheat, which is the antithesis of legality.
Robert?
Okay, so we're just talking, you're just saying computer jobs, right?
Yeah, there's a few others, but computer jobs is the easy one for me to remember.
Let's just say it hasn't kept up with the times.
Yeah. I had a girlfriend who was from Canada, and she had a difficult time. Like, she had to prove for every nursing job that she took, she had to prove that somehow an American couldn't take that job. And I thought this was very confusing, because how can you prove that an American doesn't need a nursing job?
Well, Mark, you have to go interview all 330 million Americans.
There you go.
Can you take this job? Okay, next.
Go on with your point, Robert. Maybe we're missing the mark on this.
Okay, well, I know that over here in Vermont, and it has been for an awful long time, that the farmers that are over here, they'll go and they'll have the Jamaicans come over here,
right?
And then they'll do all the farming, and then they have a house here, and they'll put them up in the house, and then at the end of the summer during the fall, they go back to Jamaica, and then, during the spring, they bring them back. And they've been doing it over here for 30, 40 years, probably.
Yeah. You imagine trying to keep a Jamaican in Vermont in a cabin.
Jamaican him crazy.
Yeah, in February.
Yeah, if the job you're going for fits within NAFTA, which I'm sure farming would, or maybe it doesn't. There's 63 jobs in that agreement in particular. Of course, there's a lot of other laws out there and agreements out there, but there is a faster track. I won't say it's a fast track, but there is a faster track to getting in, and I imagine that would fall under what you're talking about, Robert. It's a good point.
Yeah, it's excellent, because we can learn a lot from people from Jamaica and other countries, and learn a lot about their culture and stuff. And they could teach us a whole bunch of stuff, and then we can also teach them what we've learned over here.
Yeah.
I don't think we need to have any border at all.
Yeah, it's so funny, because so many people, and you're taught this in school as an American child in public school, you're taught how great it is that America is this multicultural melting pot, and yet at the same time, there's so many people that seems, no, I don't want their culture here. And it's like, well, why not? I thought this was the great thing, and I agree. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. There's strength in diversity.
Thanks for the call, Robert.
Could you imagine if you weren't allowed to visit websites that were not made by people in the U.S.? I mean, it's just ridiculous to think of the internet having borders like that.
Yeah, that is.
Well, it's kind of true. I mean, there's gambling sites you can't go to from this country.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, but could you imagine if someone's blog from wherever you couldn't go to visit it? I mean, that would just be nuts.
Sure. I love the idea of Jamaicans coming up to Vermont to teach them about pot, and the Vermonters teaching them about cheese and stuff.
I think there are probably some Vermonters who want to learn about pot.
It's like, don't worry, we know how to grow. No, anyway.
855-450 free. I do think that we would. Okay, so openborders.org has estimated that you would see a doubling, and that is an incredible statement, a doubling of the world GDP if you opened borders and allowed people to cross borders of all countries freely. Now, obviously, this isn't something that's going to happen anytime soon. Countries aren't going to open their borders. But if a large nation was to, be much more liberal in its, immigration policy, what that nation would achieve is it would get the productivity of the most productive people that would come here. Now, I don't say you give away anything for free at all. This is just for people who want to work. But that nation would get the productivity of those people. It would also apply pressure to nations around the world to have a freer, more customer-oriented government, because they could lose their people anytime. Imagine if everybody.
I even think we've been talking about ISIS tonight. I even think this is the solution to totalitarian regimes and people being mistreated by their governments. Just instead of bombing these places and saying, oh, no, you can't come here, but we're going to go to you and try to fix this mess that's been created
by bombing
you, why not just say, okay, well, we'll open the borders, and if you feel oppressed by wearing a burqa or whatever, if you've had acid thrown in your face, come live here. We'll take care of you. Not necessarily we'll take care of you, but we'll at least let you come here and make a better life for yourself.
We'll give you an opportunity.
Yeah.
And think about this for a second. I mean, if you've seen the maps of how much land the government owns in places like Nevada and out west,
sure,
it's incredible. You're telling me that if you just sectioned off an area and said, this is the Syrian concentration camp or whatever, and I'm not trying. I'm just trying to be
good,
as
Mark.
realistic as you can. Refugee camp is what I meant to say.
Refugees.
And inside that area, they can figure out who owns what land or whatever it is, and they can build whatever they want. They can bring people in, but they have to. That's their spot. That's little Syria. I'll bet you we'd have inside of a couple, a decade or two, you'd have a thriving city that would be really awesome, and we'd all benefit. Think for a second right now, if all the hardworking folks in Mexico that want to come here could move to Detroit. It would be so much better for that place. Mm-hmm. The productivity that those people would bring, they would revitalize that city.
Well, I'll say, too, I mean, speaking of kind of refugees, in the 90s, I was working at a Wendy's. I was actually a manager. And in Utica, New York, they brought in a lot of Bosnians. Now, before somebody says, well, they're white, or they're cultured or something. No, they're Muslims.
All right.
They were all Muslims.
All right.
And first off, they worked their butt off.
Good.
Okay. Now, I'll readily admit that the company or the franchisee that we were a part of got like $1,000 pretty much for everybody they hired out of that. So there was certainly incentive
to bring
from the government.
Huh.
Okay. Now, there was certainly an incentive to bring them in. Okay. Full disclosure. But let me just say this because if this whole immigration thing is, what if Muslims get in here? What if terrorists get in here? Oh, please let those Muslims in, because those girls were so beautiful, and I had times you would not believe. Okay, I mean, you can't imagine. As soon as when the lights went out, oh God, this was great. Bring on those Muslims.
And you're Jewish. They're messing with you, and they're Jewish.
And and they knew I was Jewish. I mean, at that time especially, I was really kind of raising the flag about that. And oh God, they had no problem with my Judaism. Let me tell you.
I do think
they knew I was cut.
Now, at $1,000, that's really nothing when you compare, to $1,000 is nothing to hire an employee. So, I mean,
but you're getting a good employee with that.
I can just imagine churches. The Lutherans really love immigration, by the way. I can just imagine the Lutherans cutting a check to businesses. Hey, here's $1,000 to take this employee and try him out and see what you think. I bet people would do it.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.